Another opportunity for the Dubs to get a win and continue to show the urgency that they have to this point on the homestand, although they're going to have to do it more shorthanded than they've been as Andrew Wiggins remains out, and Klay Thompson, also second of a back-to-back, is not going to play tonight. So the Warriors are going to have to do it if they're going to do it with another starter out and somebody subbing in, whether it's Kuminga or Moody, to that rotation.
Yeah, and I'm looking here, JD, for whatever it's worth. The Jazz are the 9 seed right now, with the Warriors being the 10 seed. The Jazz,
big game.
Yeah, Jazz 4.5 games back from the Nuggets. The Warriors 6 games back. They're 19-17. The Warriors are 17-18.
And it's also, I believe, the final time of 3 that the Warriors and Jazz meet this season. There's a couple of teams in the West that you only play 3 times. The Jazz are one of those. I think the Warriors only make the one trip to Salt Lake City, the game that they tricked away 3 weeks ago tonight when they had the 4-point lead with 13.3 seconds to go. So it becomes a tiebreaker game if you're into that sort of thing.
That was the reason,
because there'll only be 3, so there won't be a split.
Right, and that was the reason. And I know ultimately the training staff, nobody else cares about this, but that was one of the reasons I thought there was a chance Klay might play. And I know it's the doubleheader, and we don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah,
but
not after 38 minutes.
That was the reason, just because Klay wanted to get his get back on that game, but not going to happen. Going to have to get some more Ty Jerome threes, some more Anthony Lamb threes. Somebody's going to have to score and make sure that the Warriors stay on the right track here. I did want to talk about that top rotation, JD. When you look at the 5 starters,
sure,
and then the 7 obviously would be DiVincenzo and Jordan Poole. I guess Kuminga would be your 8th, and if I'm not mistaken, the Warriors at times ran out as many as 9 during the finals last year. Yeah. Ultimately, the big miss here so far, and I'll say this again, this goes to show how good Jokic was last season, because JaMychal Green was getting legitimate minutes on the Nuggets last year. And JaMychal Green, I don't know what is not clicking for him, injured, things like that. That's the miss right now. That's the miss. When you look at, okay, GP2 is gone, Otto Porter Jr. is gone, Bielitsa is gone. GP2 was the most irreplaceable. We get that. Otto Porter Jr., I know he had a bunch of offensive rebounds. He's hit some timely threes. I get that. But with DiVincenzo, I think, okay, you might not get the whole GP2 experience, but he's doing a good bit of it, right, as of late. Then you also have Kuminga, who I think is going to start to come into his own. The big miss here is what I think everyone felt, and then not to say that he can't come around, the big idea of what JaMychal Green would be to this team. And it's just been a miss so far.
Yeah, they thought he would be, I think, closer to, in a different way, the production that maybe Otto Porter gave.
Right.
Different players, a little older is JaMychal Green, and not as good a shooter. So I think, I'm not sure that the Warriors really, I think they believe they would get more. I think they probably knew that they weren't going to get what they got out of Otto Porter. I think they thought in signing DiVincenzo that he wouldn't give them exactly what they had from Gary Payton II, because Gary Payton II's unique. And I've mentioned this a couple of times. I think the way they've tried to use Kuminga has been a little GP2-ish.
Yeah, right.
Hey, here is, you're going to guard this player. Go hound him. Just go get on him. Go try and take him out of the game. You don't have to really think. You're just going to use your athleticism and your ability. Don't worry about your rotation and all this other stuff as far as where you have to be if the ball starts moving. Just, we're going to put you on a guy who has the ball a lot, and we're going to let you guard him and get into him, and we really think you can bother him doing that. He did that down the stretch against LaMelo Ball. He's been on primary ball handlers a lot. That's what the Warriors would do with Gary Payton II, and I think offensively they've tried to stick him closer to the basket, which is what they would do with Gary Payton II. Now, he had the ability to drift to a corner and knock down a 3 if you left him open. I still think, teams are probably going to try to make Kuminga hit it from the outside, but I think you look at last night, it was all dunks and drives for Kuminga last night. It wasn't him looking for his offense. out there trying to get after. Well, he did have the nice floater.
He did have the floater.
That was a nice play, and it was a key point in the game.
But what were you thinking when the floater went up?
No, I thought it was he was in rhythm and it was a good move. It fit. But making that that's fine if it's part of your game here and there when you're rolling and everything else is going well. Just don't make that the primary thing that you're trying to do.
Right.
And you'll be fine. So to me it was like the big takeaway on Kuminga last night was you saw the dog. Like you saw like the rebound, the rip away steal. That was a different level of I'm not going to be denied. I mean, almost in a way looked a little bit like, I know people said Iguodala, but to me almost looked a little bit like Draymond with the intensity.
And that's what he is right now. I think you could find, he is I guess silly putty in a way, and you can mold him into different things on any given day. And ultimately, the Warriors are hoping he could be a combination of all these guys when it's all said and done. And then that ceiling that we've talked about for so long, he could get pretty darn close to it. These were the 5 main plays. They got the rip-away steal from P.J. Washington, the traffic rebound over Plumlee. He gets available for that dunk with Poole when he got by him. Or I think that might have been later. The floater in the ISO versus Hayward. Then he cut for another open dunk. So that was what caused Draymond, a pretty, obviously Draymond was hyped up, but Draymond pushed him pretty hard, to let him know, you did your thing, young fella. And that went viral as well. So look, I think that the vibes, if we do a panic meter, right, for Bonte, sometimes you got to do a vibe meter. And I think the vibe meter at the beginning of the season was in a great spot. Then when we all know what happened, when that went down, the vibe meter went into a terrible spot. It's tried to get back. There have been some moments. It's popped up against the Celtics. It popped up again against the Grizzlies. It was down really low on that trip. Steph goes down. So the vibe meter is starting to climb back to a place where we would like it to be, JD.
Well, and I think the big reason why, this is why we're talking about this, John Dickinson, Allen Stiles here on 95.7 The Game in for Damon and Brado, 888-957-9570. The reason we're getting into this is because, and it keeps coming back to me, one word, urgency. There's urgency. Jonathan Kuminga played that game like he knew if the Warriors didn't win against Charlotte, that it would completely undo everything that they did against Memphis and put them right back where they were with 2 games off the board and 6 games to go on the homestand, right back before they even got home. At that point, you're right back to Brooklyn and New York and getting blown out and 1-5. You're right back to the position you were when you got on that flight, leaving New York and coming back home. And to me, that is a tone that has been set by the veteran players, but to see a young player accept that challenge, I mean, that was in a way, and look, he's still got to keep doing it, and Kuminga's been somebody that, once he does it for a few games, I think there's been a little bit of a let up, which is why, as we talked about in the first hour, Steve Kerr's had to pull the reins back and say, hey, you're not going to play as much. If you're going to focus on these things and not bring energy, then you're not going to play. And so it's, I think, always going to be a fine line. Like, I know a lot of people are quick right now to say, oh, Kuminga's in. We had Anthony Slater on yesterday when Larry was in, and Slater said, no, Kuminga's firmly entrenched in the Warriors rotation. And I think for now he is, but that is contingent on him continuing to play like he did in that game last night.
Well, and I think the reason people like Anthony Slater feel like this, JD, is because, all right, well, I love high school sports. And if you look at high school sports, you get your freshman year, your sophomore year, your junior year, your senior year. To me, this is Kuminga's sophomore year. And as a sophomore on varsity, sure, some sophomores might be ballers, but a lot of them, you're just filling a role. So as the sophomore on the varsity team, that's what Kuminga essentially is. He needed a role. And at the beginning of the season, he didn't have a role, right? They didn't know, okay, short off season, what work did you do? What are you coming in looking like? He wasn't sure what he wanted to do, who he wanted to be, who they wanted him to be. Even in the playoffs last year when he started that game in Memphis and they got their doors blown off and he didn't know what to do offensively because, like you said, they were allowing him to shoot that, hey, go ahead. We're not going to guard you, anywhere from that's not close to the basket. So I think that now in his sophomore year, hey, you have a role as the sophomore on the team. We're going to need more from you than we did as a freshman, but this isn't, just run around and do whatever you want. Your job is to come in, lock up on D, and take what the defense gives you on offense. If you move around enough, you are athletic enough that you will get opportunities. But you are not necessarily 3 and D because the 3 ball's not there yet. You are a D guy. We're going to pseudo put you in that dunker spot, and offensively, the game is going to come to you. So now I think that's why people feel confident that he's going to hold down this role, because he has a role. And I don't think he had a role at the beginning of the season.
No, and I think James Wiseman coming along is also something to look at, as far as, he got his first 2 shots last night thrown, blocked right back at his face.
Right.
And he ends up 4 of 5, and he, again, played competently enough to be a +1. I think that's a small step for James Wiseman, moving forward, as far as doing the little things. I mean, that to me, these guys becoming playable, and look, it's still fragile. It's still extremely fragile. They could collectively not play well the next 2 games, and maybe the Warriors lose one of them, and this whole, I think the whole season right now for the Warriors is fragile. A lot more than people think. As far as, we get a lot of the text line. A lot of people call in. It's like, what are you guys worried about? This team's fine as long as everybody's healthy. It doesn't matter what. They could be 40 and 42. It doesn't matter. I'm not buying any of that. This team, at some point, if they make a run in the playoffs, we're going to look back and say, in the regular season, at some point they showed us. And the worry that I would have right now for the Warriors is, if they don't play well enough now, in the next 6, in the next 11, through January, the concern that I would have is maybe one more injury pops up, and all of a sudden they say, you know what, we're just calling it off. Yeah. And that doesn't mean trade everybody, but it just means, and we've seen them do it. You know what, we're going to focus on the development of the young guys. And even that, I think, in a way, you wouldn't be fully comfortable doing, because you still have Steph and Clay and Draymond, and you almost owe it to them to try and be as good as you possibly can.
You're still putting miles on them. You're still putting miles on them, and what, miles for nothing?
The Warriors have been lucky in the sense, and this is the first year, really, I think. And I think 2 years ago was a little bit this way, but Clay was not around. So it is different. And this is the one thing I hope, because I think it makes it fascinating. There's been a couple, the Warriors have in some ways had it easy in what their decision has had to be for a particular season. Last year, it was clear. They didn't know what they had at the beginning, but it was 18-2, it was 30-9, it was 41-13. They were like, damn, this team can win a championship. Clay's coming back. By January, for me, it was middle of November, but by January, everybody's like, hey, they can win it.
And that was their acquisition too, Clay.
Yeah.
Right? So they didn't have to be in that, because they knew, all right, well, we're reacquiring Clay.
And they were banged up, so down the stretch, they didn't play as well. I think it was 22 and 26 or whatever. Anyway, I think I got the math wrong on that. Doesn't matter. They reached that point, and then they didn't win as much. Here's the thing, though. They knew last year championship. 2 years ago, when they won 39 out of 72 and made the play and ended up losing, they knew they couldn't win a championship.
Right.
That was a year where they knew they couldn't win it. The year before that, they were 15-50. They knew they couldn't win it. Right? It was Curry got hurt. It was over. Clay was already hurt. They had D'Angelo. It was done. They knew. So it was easy. The goal at that point was tank, basically. and they didn't have to actively do it, because they just were that bad.
It was natural.
And then the season got shut down, and they were one of 8 teams that didn't get invited to the bubble, right? So it was easy, and they didn't want to go to the bubble. Right. So it was anyway. So it was easy. They were off the hook. So very clear cut what the deal was at that point, and everybody knew. And then before that, it was obviously championship or bust. Going back, Durant, pre-Durant. Then they were young and up and coming. So obviously, you're trying to be as good as you possibly can before that. What I'm getting back to, though, Alan, is this is really the first year where the decision as to what to do hasn't been totally made for them. And they've got everybody, but they're not playing well, and some guys are in and out, and they think they can win it, but it looks like maybe they're not quite deep enough or good enough, or the young players are far enough along and all of that. But to me, it's I hope everybody stays healthy enough to where they have to fight for it. I want to see them have to fight for it. I don't want the Warriors to get the easy way out of, well, somebody got hurt and was done for the year, and then we knew they couldn't win it, so nothing mattered. I want all of this to continue to matter to the level that we've seen from their core star players that are active, to where they're no, if we're going to win a title, we got to start winning games now.
I think that because of last year. I think I'd be more worried about that, JD, if they didn't win last year. When you have a repeat possibility, even the injury, even a future injury that we don't hope happens, anything that happens, as long as it's not season ending for any of the core pieces, I don't think they'll punt. It would have to be one of Draymond.
I'm just saying
Steph,
somebody get hurt
for the year.
Yeah, I'm just saying somebody gets hurt. Like
right.
if anyone
done for the year, though.
Yeah, done for the year, done for a significant enough time to where you're not going to be good. Like if Steph Curry wasn't coming back till March, we'd already be having that conversation.
We would.
We would be.
Yeah.
We would. The last 3 weeks would be about that, or 2 weeks, or whatever it is. 10 days. God, I guess it's only been 2 weeks.
Yeah,
feels like it's been 8 weeks.
No,
it's only 2 weeks. Sheesh.
I mean,
it was 2 weeks ago tonight. It was 2 weeks ago tonight. He got hurt.
A long couple weeks here.
Been a long 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Also, Damon and Ratto, we're streaming on YouTube. Head to youtube.com/957 The Game to watch us live and see what's going on in the studio. Hey, everybody. I can wave. Yeah. How's it going? You can like and subscribe for all 95.7 The Game content on YouTube. You want to get a call in here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go to Rich in Fremont on 95.7 The Game. Rich, you're on with JD and Allen here on a Wednesday. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, Allen. Hey, JD. Thanks for taking the call, guys. I think one of the things I did like about yesterday's game was that, you look at Steve Kerr and you say to yourself, okay, here's a guy who has stepped up to the plate as far as being a coach and being the first-time coach of any NBA team. And, you had whispers of people saying, well, he's got Steph, he's got Clay, then he had KD, so it was easy for him to coach those guys. But I saw something last night, in my opinion, that kind of puts him in a higher echelon as a coach because he coached up guys without his main players, and they managed to stretch out a win. Okay, we got to be honest, guys. That game could have went either way.
Yep.
And to coach up the younger guys and bring them to a level where now they're starting to show some resiliency, which is what we've been waiting for from this young core. Okay, and in my opinion, that's good coaching. Okay, so hats off to Steve. Thanks, guys.
No, I think absolutely. He didn't have a choice. Like there were no other options when you've got certain amount of guys out. It wasn't the question of why is Ty Jerome playing over Moody. They were both playing because they both had to play. It wasn't why is Lamb playing over Kuminga, even though they both had to play. Everybody had to play. Wiseman had to play. JaMychal Green's out. Like there's no other option at that point.
Right. You can't sit there and say, all right, well, if it wasn't for this, then that. And we've seen it, man. I mean, there have been guys that have been in good situations, and once those situations are taken away, they aren't the same person. And I think Steve Kerr, I mean, everybody has that, whether it's your dad, your mom, your uncle, your aunt. We all have some family member that we've heard say, I mean, if I had those guys on my team, I could probably win a championship.
Yeah, that's
we've all had them. It doesn't matter who they are.
It's like the guy that said he could score 22 a night.
That's right. That's right. Shout out text line. Shout out Xfinity Mobile, my beloved Xfinity Mobile text line. JD, I did want to get into a little bit of what we talked about before the break about Wiseman.
Sure. And
one of the things that you had said is that Wiseman doesn't really know, doesn't play well with the starters, right? We got the call. Why don't you start Wiseman? Things like that. And I've always said this, JD. I know Wiseman has a long way to go, but I do think it's a little bit of a two-way street. And I do think that he hasn't shown enough promise for Steve Kerr or anybody to say, hey, and it is Steph Curry, don't get me wrong, hey, let's try to get Wiseman in the mix more, because that sentence sounds crazy. A Steph contested three is probably, you're going to feel better about that than a lot of different things that Wiseman can do. But in just the idea of Wiseman playing with this team, I do think that there was a transition period that nobody really spoke about a lot in terms of the Warriors had never played with an athletic big like this who was seen to be or possibly could be a focal point of an offense as well as a defense. Now, he's not there.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but I'm curious if he was closer to there, how it would even look because they're not used to it. They're used to, the center is basically the least important offensive player when it comes to shooting the basketball.
There was a point, and Wiseman did for the most part a good job catching the ball last night, but there was a point last night where it was a one time they actually hit him for a post up and he lost. He couldn't handle it.
He did lose it.
And he lost the ball. And I remember making a note to myself for the post game saying, well, that's why you don't post him up.
And he's
for all the people
for
that say for all the people who've said he's open.
He's asking
there's been
for
a lot
too.
And he's been a lot of that. It's let's stick with the pick and roll lobs.
Right.
Let's stick with and Kuminga found him twice. I mean, that's Kuminga when he's willing to move the ball or even take a little quick dribble and hand it off to somebody. Like he's done a little more of that, but he found Kuminga found Wiseman for 2 of his buckets just based on getting downhill and drawing 2 and flipping it to him. So I think that's to see those two have a connection, I think is a positive sign. Let's sneak in Joe in San Francisco here on the phones at 888-957-9570. What's going on, Joe?
Hey, guys. Happy New Year, Alan and JD. I just rewatched the game right now, and I was just cringing watching Wiseman. As you know, he had 2 main runs in the second half and the first half. Second half, he was a little better. But it should be a rare event for a 7-footer to get rejected. He got blocked twice
yep.
in his first session. How does that happen? And I'm saying I know why it happens, because he gets the ball so low, he crouches down like he's a little guard trying to protect against Lilliputians stealing the ball. It's like he's got no natural feel. At the end of the third quarter, when they're winding the clock down, they ran this play. Wiseman crashes to the rim, and he crashes too deep. Under the rim, the ball bounces a little over his head. It would have been an easy dunk. Compare and contrast that. I know it's a different sport, but compare and contrast that against a guy like Brock Purdy, who you just see has a natural sense and feel for the game. He slides. In Seattle, he slides with his left hand out. He can make his little subtle adjustments in his passes. I see none of that from Wiseman. How do you get blocked not once but twice? This should not happen, JD. How does this happen?
Well, you laid it out, Joe, and thanks for the call because we're up against it. I mean, he brings the ball down. I mean, that's another reason why you don't want to post him up necessarily. And both of those times where he gets the rock, you're thinking, okay, there's action there, and you're like, oh gosh, like both. I mean, it's just you gotta go high with it. You gotta be forceful with it. I mean, that's as simple as that. I mean, that's an adjustment I think he can make. And again, I do give him credit for finishing for the other 5 opportunities after that. I mean, that can be a little demoralizing when you get it. When you're the biggest guy on the floor and you get your stuff thrown twice, and it happened the first 2 times. I mean, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a rough night. And I thought he had a relatively decent night after that. It wasn't the game against Memphis, but he helped them a little bit last night. He didn't crush them. He helped them a little bit, and he didn't crush them.
Right, and I thought, look, defensively, I thought that because it's to the point now where so many people talk about every little thing Wiseman does, and I find myself really just zeroing in on what he's doing. And look, he's trying, man. He's doing the right things. He's moving his feet. He's trying to box out. So at least I'm going to give him an E for effort right now, JD.